Alrighty, so here's the second video. This one is on sex-linked Mendelian inheritance. The first one was on autosomal or simple Mendelian inheritance. And if you're having trouble with that, please go back and watch the first video so that you can get that down. In this video, we'll cover sex-linked Mendelian inheritance, which is a little more complicated than simple, but it builds on the same principles. So again, I am going to walk through a handful of sex-linked inheritance problems in order to show you how they work. And I'll go through a variety of them so that you should be prepared to take on any question that you bump into in the homework. The ones that I find students struggle with the most on that one are problems 2 and 6, and I'll cover those two last. All right. So what is sex-linked? Remember, in my first video, I pointed out over here, we were pointing out that everything is autosomal except X and Y. If simple Mendelian was autosomal inheritance, then sex-linked has to do with genes that are on the X and Y chromosomes. Now, I think it's important to note that the Y chromosome, look how small it is compared to the X. The X chromosome and the Y chromosome are totally different. They're paired up together, true, but an X chromosome and a Y chromosome are totally different. They don't carry the same genes, they don't behave the same, they aren't the same chromosome. And that's going to become important here in a sec, and part of the reason why sex-linked is a little bit more difficult than autosomal. What the struggle is here is there are so many different variables we have to keep track of. The big two are we have to keep track of the trait, and we have to keep track of what gender the child is. Let me show you how we do that. First off, I am going to abandon this format right here. Okay? Not entirely, but let me show you what I'm going to do. Rather than doing big R, little r, I am first going to write what chromosomes are present. And I'm going to use them in capitals. So to be a man, traditionally I like to put the dad on the top of the square and the mom on the left, but either way. To be a man, you have to have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. To be a woman, you have to have 2 X's. Okay? When I bring this X down and this X across, I end up with X, X. When I bring mom's X across and dad's Y down, you end up with X, Y. When I bring mom's X down, or sorry, dad's X down and mom's X over, you end up with X, X, and this last one ends up being X, Y. See how I got that? So what does this tell me? This tells me that every single time I have a pregnancy, I am going to end up with a 50% chance of getting a girl and a 50% chance of getting a guy, which makes sense. Now let's throw in a little twist. Albinism is an X-linked recessive disorder in humans. Time out, what does that even mean? X-linked means that the gene we are concerned about that has something to do with skin pigmentation is located on the X chromosome. Before we didn't care, it was on 1 through 22. Now it matters. It's on the X chromosome, and we'll show you why that matters, why we have to specify that. And we are told it's recessive. Mary is normal, but her father had albinism. Okay, so first off, wife is normal, has normal pigmentation, but dad was albino. So she had, the only way he could be albino is have the recessive trait, so he had to give her a recessive, but she's normal, so what does that make her? That would make her, under these rules, big R, little r, right? Now, the way I'm going to show that is put a superscript on the X. I can't really do that on a spreadsheet, so I kind of am simulating it by putting it in a little box in the upper corner here. So by doing this, I'm saying, oops, sorry. By doing this, I'm saying that this X chromosome in particular has a capital R gene on it. That way, now I can keep track of two variables. I can keep track of the fact that it's an X chromosome, and I can keep track of the fact that it's an R, a big R or a little r. Good so far? So she had to get, she's normal, so she has to have a big R, and she had to get the albinism trait from dad, which we were told was recessive, X little r. Does that make sense? This just tells me that one of her X's has a little r on it, and one of her X's has a big R. Now let's go to dad. She marries Philip, who's an albino. Now what is the genotype for an albino man? Every single person I talk to always goes to little r, which is true in every case except sex-linked, right? Because little r true is homozygous white, but remember where this trait is kept. It is located on the X chromosome. And X and Y are two completely different countries. So the gene for skin color is found on the X, but not the Y. So he is going to have the albinism trait here, and I'm not going to put a superscript on the Y because the gene is not there. Let me repeat that. I am not going to put a superscript on the Y because the gene is not there. This is incorrect because this implies that the Y chromosome has the little r gene, and that's not true. Males only have one X chromosome. So this means that males cannot be heterozygous for X-linked traits because they only have one X. So they can either be dominant or recessive. They can't be half and half. Women can because they have two X's, like the wife here. Okay. All right. So now when I bring these across, I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did before. I bring an X with a little r down, I bring an X with a big R across, and I end up with X big R, X little r. Bring X across, it's an X big R, and I bring the Y from dad. See that? The Y comes down. And again, the Y didn't come with a trait up here, so it's not going to come with a trait down here. So this is simply X big R, Y. This one, X little r, and X little r. And then we bring the X little r across, and the blank Y down, because again, the Y chromosome does not have X-linked genes on it. All right, here's our cross. What does this tell me? Well, for a male to have albinism, he has to have one little r because there's no big R to compete with it, and he can only have one copy of the gene. So this gentleman will have normal skin pigmentation because he has the dominant trait, which we were told up here is normal skin. The dominant trait is normal skin, so let me make that, I don't know. I'm sorry if that's racist. Forgive me. Okay, so we've got normal skin pigmentation here. Down here, that little r says albinism, and there isn't another one to pick for, so he stays white-skinned. Okay. Over here, now we've got a question. We've got an X big R and an X little r. Well, the X big R, we said, is dominant, and it overpowers the little r. And since big R is for normal skin, we will color it normal. And now here, this daughter got a little r from mom and a little r from dad, so she's going to be albino because she doesn't have the dominant normal allele, so she's going to end up with normal pigmentation. Or sorry, with albino pigmentation, forgive me. So now look at this. Of my children in this cross, 50% of the kids would end up with albino skin, and 50% of the kids would end up with normal skin. Or sorry, we'd have a 50% chance every pregnancy of ending up with a kid with normal skin, and a 50% chance with every pregnancy of getting a kid with white skin. Again, I could have multiple kids that are all the same color. It's just a flip of the coin. Now, this is all fine and dandy. But they'll throw questions at you that'll make you think. In this case, this is a good one to start with, because what if I ask you, what percentage of the girls, or what is the odds that if I get a girl, I will end up with a girl that has normal skin? Well, that changes the ball game, because notice half of the possible combos are boys. So the way I answer that question is I completely ignore the boys. They're no longer part of the Punnett square because I'm only asking you girls. In this case, the answer is still the same. It's half the girls, half the girls. But let me show you an example where that's not always the case. But they will ask you they will ask you that question is of the girls, and don't tell them 25%. Because you can't have 25% when there are only two options. I guarantee you someone's going to do that. So that's why I emphasize that a lot. Okay. Let me give you a different cross that's not this one. So let me hide this again to avoid confusion. Let me reset my coloring here. And we'll delete these up here and these up here. Again, it's going to be XY, XY. But now let me give the dad a big R up here, which means he has normal skin pigmentation. Because remember, he's only got the one allele. And we're going to give mom, how do I want to do this? We're going to give mom little r, little r. Mom is little r, dad is big R. Okay. That brings the big R from dad, little r from mom, big R from dad, little r from mom, little r from mom, y from dad, little r from mom, y from dad. Good so far? Now, let me ask you that question again. In this cross, what are the odds that I will end up with a daughter that has normal pigmentation? We ignore the boys, and we look at the girls. Dominant overpowers recessive, normal pigmentation. Dominant overpowers recessive, normal pigmentation. So 100% of this couple's daughters will have normal skin. You see how I got there? Because when I ask you of the daughters, what is the probability of getting a normal skinned child? That'd be 100%, or a normal skinned daughter, forgive me. That would be 100%. Now let's flip the question. What if I ask you, what is the odds of getting a normal skinned boy? Now we're going to ignore the girls and just look at the boys. The boys are giving me 0% normal skin. So now the answer is different between girls and guys. The boys end up with 0%, girls end up with 50 or with 100%. That's where gender becomes important, and that's why I have to include the Y's in this. Because I'm keeping track of boys and girls, and I'm keeping track of where the trait is, and it has to only be on the X chromosome in this case. Let me throw another one at you here. What if I make mom big R, little r? That goes in here and changes that one and that one. Both parents have normal pigmentation. What percentage of the daughters have normal pigmentation? Ignore this half. You end up with X big R, X big R, normal pigmentation. X big R, X little r. That one overpowers that one, normal pigmentation. Again, 100% of the daughters have normal pigmentation. Now let's look at just the boys. Of the boys, big R, normal skin. Little r, albino skin. 50% normal. So the answer to this question could be 100% of the daughters will have normal skin, or 100% chance of having a daughter with normal skin, and a 50% chance of having a boy with normal skin. Now the numbers are again different, and they're not extreme or extreme. It was 100% on one and 50% on the other. So that's possible. So you just have to keep track of where the X's and the Y's are, and what trait is on which gene or which chromosome, and don't make the mistake of putting the trait on the Y chromosome, because it does not belong there. It belongs on the X, and men only have one of those. Okay. Let's work through a different kind of problem down here. Nutjob's disease is an imaginary X-linked disease in humans that results in attention problems and memory loss. There you go. The allele for this disease is dominant to the allele for normal function. Dallin has the disease, but his father does not. He is married to Christy, who is positively perfect in every way, it is true, and shows no sign of the disease. What is the chance they will have a son who is normal? Okay, so first off, sex-linked. Where do I start? Putting down the chromosomes of the parents. Dad has to be XY by definition. Mom has to be XX by definition. That means 50% of my kids will be XX. Oops. And 50% of my kids will be XY. 50% chance for girls, 50% chance for boys. Okay. Now let's actually read the question in deeper here. It's X-linked, which means, again, it is going to be on the X chromosome, not the Y. And it results in attention problems. Skip over that. The allele for the disease is dominant to the allele for normal function. Now, that's important to note. It is possible to have a disease that the disease is dominant to the non-disease. That is possible. Most people think of disease as a recessive thing. It's not always true. A disease can be dominant, and in this case, the disease is the dominant allele. So now we need to keep that in mind. Dallin has the disease. So what's his genotype? Well, I don't need to know his parents because he can't be heterozygous. And the only way to have the disease is a big R. He is X big R Y. See how I did that? I interpreted the evidence and saw what possible combos could make this particular effect. The only way to do that on a male is to have an X big R Y. Female. Now notice, before I move on to the female, I stuck a sentence in here, a phrase in here, but his father does not. That starts getting people thinking, oh, well, then that means he's heterozygous or something like that. You cannot be heterozygous. That is thrown in there to trip you up. And you may or may not see questions like that. So if you know what you're doing well enough, you can weed out what they tell you that's not important. You didn't need to know that my father didn't have the disease, because I do. Okay. He is married to Christy, the wife, who is positively perfect in every way and shows no sign of the disease. Okay, so if dominant is disease, again, what is her genotype? She doesn't show the disease, so she has to be little r, because she is normal. Now what cross do I end up with? I end up with X big R, X little r, X little r Y, X big R, X little r, and X little r Y. All right. What is the chance that they will have a son who is normal? Normal, remember, is the little r allele. if it were females, the female, in order to be normal, has to be little r, because the big R disease allele will overpower little r if present. So for a female, the females have to be little r. For a male, they just have to be little r to be normal. In this case, what are the chances you have a son who's normal? In this question, I'm not even asking about the girls. So we can ignore them. We end up with a 50% chance of boys, but of the boys, the little r makes a normal trait. The little r makes a normal trait. 100% of the boys in this case would be normal. Just for humor's sake, what about the girls? Big R overpowers the little r. Big R is the disease allele. Disease. Big R overpowers the little r. Disease. So you would end up with 100% of the girls would have the disease. Does that make sense? So again, the answer is different. We've got 0 and 100 with the disease, or since we're asking about normal, it would be 100% of the boys would be normal and 0% of the girls would be normal. Make sense? So again, don't be shocked. Read carefully. The disease can be the dominant allele. Dallin excels at being wrong. It's true. It turns out only boys get the trait, so it seems. Who knew? Assuming this is a genetically inherited trait, how might this be possible? Okay. Only boys get it. How is that possible? For generation upon generation upon generation, girls are always right. And boys are the only ones that get the trait. Why? Well, what does every boy have that every girl doesn't? A Y chromosome. This whole time we've just been doing X-linked ones, but the Y chromosome is still a legit chromosome and still has the ability to carry genes. So again, XY makes a male, XX makes a female, and the trait is going to show up on the Y chromosome and not on the X's. Now, if you do your crosses, you end up with X, Y, X, Y, X, 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 X. And you end up with these two Y's having big R's and none of the X's having it. So, what percentage of the boys have the trait? 100%. Because every boy gets the Y chromosome from their dad. Of the girls who has the trait, none of them. Because no girl gets a Y chromosome from dad by definition. Does that make sense? So this is called a Y-linked trait. These other ones were X-linked traits. This is a Y-linked trait. And the telltale sign of this is A, only boys get it, and B, you will find it passed from generation to generation to generation to generation over centuries. Because I have the same Y chromosome as my paternal great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Because he passed it to my great-great-great-grandfather, who passed it to my great-great-grandfather, who passed it to my great-grandfather, who passed it to my grandfather, who passed it to my father, who gave it to me. So if it's Y-linked, it will be passed down the paternal line for generations. And only boys will get it and not daughters. But all of the boys will get it. So if I have 6 sons, all of the boys would get it because they all have to get my trait. Does that make sense? All right, let me go turn on the light quick. All righty, there we go, that's better. All right, here's the next question. In tulips, flower or color is an X-linked trait. Red flowers are dominant to white flowers. Heterozygous flowers are speckled red and white. If a speckled tulip breeds with a red tulip, what percentage of their offspring will be speckled? Okay, this one is an example that is very much like problem 2 on your sex-linked paper. And it's kind of an interestingly done question because it requires you, in order to answer the question properly, there's information for next week, and we'll give you that info next week. So for this week, we're telling you that heterozygous flowers are speckled red and white. Now you've got 3 phenotypes instead of 2. So all you need to know for this week, and we'll clarify it next week, but it's going to confuse the living daylights out of everyone. Heterozygous flowers are speckled red and white. Big R flowers are red, and little r flowers are white. Okay. We've got, it's sex linked. First thing I do, if the male has to be an XY, female XX. Okay. The trait is on the X linked. Perfect. I'm going to be putting it there, not there. Red flowers are dominant to white. Okay. Heterozygous are speckled red and white. Okay. If a speckled tulip, okay, speckled. Is the speckled tulip, assuming flowers have genders, is the speckled tulip the male or the female? The speckled tulip has to be the female. Why? Because males cannot be heterozygous for X-linked traits because they only have one X, and heterozygous requires you to have 2 by definition. So only females of this species can be speckled. Does that make sense? Because the only way you can be speckled is big R, little r, and males only have 1 R. So she is speckled. Big R, little r. Okay, a speckled tulip breeds with a red tulip. Now he's red, so we've got big R, and there isn't another R. Again, don't get mistaken in putting it on the Y chromosome. This is an X-linked trait. I am hammering that in because everyone does it every year. So I am hammering that in. Don't put it on the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome does not carry the flower color gene. Only the X does. So he only has 1 copy. And since he's red, it's a big R. Okay. If we do our crosses, we end up with XX, X, Y, X, 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 Y. This one will be X big R, X big R. This one will be X big R, Y, X big R, X little r, X little r, Y. Okay. What percentage of their offspring will be speckled? Now notice I didn't ask genders in this case. So now I'm considering the whole picture. So will this one be speckled? No, it's got big R. It only produces red proteins. It is going to be a red flower. So this one is red. What about this one? X big R, Y. That big R says red flower. So this one will be red. X big R, X little r. The big R overpowers the little r. We end up with this flower being red. About this flower, X little r, Y. That little r isn't overpowered by a red, so it stays white. How many of my offspring came out speckled? 0%. So even though she was a speckled flower, none of the kids ended up being speckled. And even then, only the females could have been. But in this case, since neither, oh, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. Okay, forgive me. It's been a long day. This one's heterozygous. Big R, little r. Forgive me. This one would be speckled. I am so glad. I hope I don't get crazy emails about that. I am going to pattern this sort of to make it appear speckled. Gracious. Okay, forgive me. I am not imperfect. Okay, so now we can see that we have 25% of the offspring are speckled, or 50% of the girls. Forgive me for that confusion. I'm sure some people just lost some hair there. All right. So we would end up with 25%, which is that one right there, because heterozygous flowers are speckled red and white. And we'll tell you why next week. Sound good? That's the style of problem 2. The calico cat problem. Just understand for this week, heterozygous, when it tells you, is the bicolor one. Okay. Last one, and this is the doozy and a half. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. This is the style of problem 6. And I go through this one and make sure I work it out very slowly, because this one is hard. It's very hard. And it makes you think. So I don't know if there's an official way to go about this, but a couple of semesters ago, I kind of developed a way that I like to do it and that I like to teach it to people. And so I'm going to do it that way because I believe it makes things easier. You just have to think a little outside the box. Okay. So let me take you to this one, because this is really trippy. Baldness is a sex-influenced autosomal trait in humans. Now, time out. What does that mean? I've got sex and autosomal in the same sentence. What sex-influenced means is it's an autosomal trait, just like we've been doing, just like we did up here. So it's not on a sex chromosome. But based on what gender you are, you wind up with different effects. Meaning, actually, give me a sec. Let's come back to that. In males, baldness is dominant, whereas in females, it's recessive. Wait, hold on. Same trait, different results based on what gender you are? How's that possible? Because sex-influenced traits are influenced by hormones and other factors that are influenced based on what gender you are. So males have more testosterone, females have more estrogen and progesterone. So the hormones affect the gene differently. So it changes the dominance based on what gender you are. Oh, now let's figure out how to go about this. Because people get all tripped up. Because if we run this like this problem, a big R it represents something different for a male than for a female. So I'm going to throw the rules out the window, including my own rule of using 2 different letters, and show you how I'm going to go about this. Sound good? So I'm going to walk through it slowly. Feel free to pause the video, rewind. You're welcome to work through this a couple of times because it's a doozy and a half. All right. In males, baldness is dominant. In females, baldness is recessive. Dallin is going bald. His dad is not bald, and his wife's hair has thinned slightly over the years. What are their chances their sons and daughters will exhibit baldness? Okay. Would we do what we've done? Would we do it this way? No. Why is that? The reason we do that or the reason we're not going to do this is because this whole time we've been doing this to show that the gene was on the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. In this case, the gene's autosomal. It has nothing to, it is not attached to the sex chromosomes. So it would be inaccurate to portray it this way, and it will get us confused. Would I do it this way? Big R, little r, big R, little r. I guarantee you someone's going to go about it this way. And this is going to blow your mind and trip you up, because for a male, big R means bald. Wow, that's really big. Okay, scratch that. Big R means bald. But for a female, big R means not bald. So now we're talking about baldness and the letters change. That is going to blow people's minds, because once you stick them together like this, big R, well, is that person bald or not? I don't know. It depends on where the R came from. That's going to blow your mind away. Don't do that. Definitely avoid doing that, because it will just fry your brain, and then you'll feel really frustrated with yourself that you can't figure it out. So let me show you how I'm going to go about it. Over here, we used an X and a Y to represent a chromosome, and then put a suffix, or sorry, a superscript, forgive me, a superscript with the trait on it. In this case, I can't use X and Y because it's not sex-linked, but I am going to use a number to represent one of the autosomal chromosomes. So dad is going to have, let's say, for example, this baldness trait is on chromosome 7. 7 is my favorite number. So let's say it's on chromosome 7. Dad has 2 chromosome 7s. Mom also has 2 chromosome 7s. Sound good? Follow me so far? We're saying the trait is on chromosome 7. And by definition, a human has to have 2 chromosome 7s. So we've got mom with 2 chromosome 7s, dad with 2 chromosome 7s. Now, I told you earlier not to use 2 different letters. That is true, but in this case, I am going to, in order to help convey the principle and prevent it from getting confusing with my big R, little r principle. In this case, I'm going to use yes and no, or yes baldness trait and no not baldness trait. Because whether it's dominant or not, it's still a baldness trait, right? So yes means it is a gene that results in baldness. No means it is a gene that results in no baldness. Sorry, the first one was baldness. No means no baldness. Good? So before I go and lay out what's going to be on these chromosomes, let's come lay out the rules. In males, baldness is dominant. Okay. Let's come over here. If a boy gets a yes baldness, gets baldness and baldness, will he be bald or not? Well, he only has genes for bald, so he is going to be bald. Okay. If the boy doesn't have bald and no bald, the genes don't contribute to baldness, is he going to be bald? No. Because he doesn't have a gene there that could possibly make him go bald, so he will not be bald. The heterozygous is where this gets interesting. He's got one gene that says yes, be bald, and one gene that says no, don't be bald. This is where we have to look up here. Which one's dominant? In males, bald is dominant. So in males, the yes overpowers the no. So will a heterozygous male be bald or not? He will be bald because the male rules say baldness is dominant. So there's kind of like a hierarchy, you notice. First off, it's the gene. In order to be bald, you have to have a bald gene. If you don't have a bald gene, Doesn't matter what hormones you have, you're not going to be bald. Because you can't possibly go bald if you don't have a bald gene. If you have two bald genes, then it's impossible for you not to lose your hair, because both of your genes say be bald. End of story. Doesn't matter what hormones you have, you're bald. Now down here, this is where it becomes the question, because now we don't have yes I can't look at it and be like, yes, he's bald, or no, he's not bald. Now it's a toss-up. And in the toss-up, my rules up here say testosterone says, ding, you're going to be bald. The testosterone prefers baldness. So if given an option, it will have the male be bald. With this last one, the testosterone was not given a choice. So he had to leave it not bald. But when given a choice, testosterone will make the man bald. Now let's go to the girls' rules. Yes, bald, yes, bald. Will that make bald or not? Well, in girls, in this case, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what hormones you have, estrogen doesn't have a choice. Estrogen has to make you bald because that's the only traits you got. Bald. Now for the girls that are all freaking out, female pattern baldness is different than male pattern baldness. Male pattern baldness is hair recession. Female pattern baldness is hair thinning. I'm jealous. Okay. For girls, if they have two no genes, what will they be? They will not be bald, because estrogen doesn't have a choice. And even then, estrogen up here, baldness is recessive, which means when given a choice, estrogen will pick no. Testosterone picks yes when given a choice. Estrogen picks no when given a choice. And that's where that's where the difference comes in. So here, estrogen is given a choice, yes or no. Up here we were told estrogen prefers no. So this will be not bald for females. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter until you get to heterozygous. In heterozygous, the decision comes down to what the hormone prefers. And whatever the hormone prefers is the dominant one. So baldness was preferred by testosterone, hence it was dominant. Estrogen prefers not bald, so it will be recessive. Now let's apply our rules over here. Dallin is going bald. Okay, right there, let's go look at our rules. There are two possible options for a boy to be bald. Yes, yes, or yes, no. His dad is not bald. Now, what does that tell you? What is the only possible combo for his dad not to be bald? Testosterone will always choose to be bald if given a choice. So the only way I can make my dad not bald is to not give the testosterone a choice and make myself not bald by giving it two no's. So my dad, grandpa, had to be no on both of them, which means I will be yes, no, because I am bald and yet I had to get a no gene from dad. Does that make sense? So I'm going to use yes and no as my superscripts like I did big R, little r. So dad is going to be yes, no, in that this chromosome 7 carries a yes, make him bald gene, and this chromosome 7 carries a no, don't make him bald gene. And because testosterone picks that one over that one, this is the trump card and he's bald. Okay. Now let's go to the wife. Wife's hair has thinned slightly over the years. That's female pattern baldness. The wife's hair thins out. So she is going bald under a female's definition. What is the only possible combo for a girl to be bald? She has to be yes, yes, because If estrogen is given a choice, it will choose not to be bald. So the only way to make her bald is to take away estrogen's choice and make her bald by giving her 2 yeses. So she has to be yes, yes, where both of them say, yes, you're going to be bald, and estrogen's like, bring it. Does that make sense? So estrogen only gets a choice if it has a possibility to make a choice. In this case, it doesn't. So the wife is bald, the husband is bald, but for 2 different reasons. Okay. Now let's do the combos. Oops, that happens to be an and, not a 7. Okay. 7, 7, 7. Because each parent's going to give a chromosome 7 to their kid. The dad gives a chromosome 7, yes. Mom gives a chromosome 7, yes. Mom gives a chromosome 7, yes. Dad gives a chromosome 7, no. Dad gives a chromosome 7, yes. Mom gives a chromosome 7, yes. Mom gives a chromosome 7, yes. Dad gives a chromosome 7, no. Perfect. We've done our Punnett square. Now what? Well, the question asks us, what are their chances their sons and daughters will exhibit baldness? Well, in this case, notice over here I had to keep track of what gender it was because only these rules applied to males and only these rules applied to females. These are autosomal. Both genders get chromosome 7s from both parents. So all 4 squares apply to both genders. And now this is where our rules come in. Does that make sense? So I used the rules to put together what the parents had. Now I've made the combos of kids. Now I have to figure out what shows up based on the gender of their children. So let's say all 4 of these squares are boys. What color, or sorry, will this boy be bald or not? He's got a yes bald, he's going to be bald. There wasn't even a choice. So this will be bald. Let's show peach for bald, because when my hair recedes, it's going to be peach, that's for sure. Okay, now here, actually, let's make it blue to signify we're talking about boys. Okay, if it's a blue square, that means he's bald. So in this case, he got a yes bald, there wasn't a choice, he's bald. Over here, this boy has a yes bald and a no bald. So now there's a choice. We have to go look at testosterone's preferences over here. A yes, no results in a bald because testosterone always picks the yes. So this one will be bald because that yes, thanks to testosterone, trumps that no. Okay, bald. Now this boy, yes, yes. Testosterone doesn't have a choice. This boy is bald because both of his genes gave him the baldness trait. And down here, I've got a yes and a no. For boys, this yes is chosen by the testosterone. So this boy will be bald because that yes trumps that no. So what percentage of my sons will be bald? 100%. You see how I got that? Because I don't have X and Y to worry about, all 4 squares apply to both genders. So I ran all 4 squares while focusing on just the boys' rules. And that told me that all 4 of the boy options result in a bald boy. Hence, 100% of boys will be bald. So let me write that down here. 100% boys bald. Now, when we clear these colorings away, notice I still am going to retain the same cross. I don't have to change the yeses and nos. We just have to apply now the girls' rules to it to see how the girls will end up with these possible combos. Because remember, gender is not determined by autosomal chromosomes. So all 4 apply to both genders. So now let's run all 4 squares for the girls. This one, yes, yes. Estrogen prefers no if there's an option, but there isn't one. So according to our rules, yes, yes for a girl means bald. Pink. Over here, we've got a yes, no. Because there's a choice, we have to go look at estrogen's preferences. Estrogen prefers the no, so this one remains not bald. Down here, I have a yes, yes. Estrogen's not given a choice, so it grudgingly accepts being bald because that's the only possibility. And over here, we've got a yes and a no. Again, estrogen has to pick. Yes, no, makes a no because estrogen picks the no. So then she keeps her hair. So 100% of the boys were bald, but using the same Punnett square, I just came out with 50% of girls are bald. You see that? By using that yes-no thing, I could keep track of both non-dominant and recessive. I'm ignoring those rules. I'm saying, is it a bald trait or is it a not bald trait? And now once I figured out the Punnett square, now I'm going to come back and apply the rules based on what gender the children are. And I am going to go through the rules assuming that all 4 squares apply to both genders. So what would it be like if all 4 of these were boys? What would it be like if all 4 of these were girls? Based on what I determined estrogen and testosterone's preferences were. So 100% of the sons of this couple will be bald, but only 50% of the girls will be because of estrogen and testosterone's preferences. That is my method of going about problem 6. This isn't problem 6. I can't give you the answers. You got to be able to figure it out. But if you use this method of pick your favorite number between 1 and 22, use that as the chromosome, and then use yes and no up top, then that will help you keep track of, that will help you keep track of what is what. And then once you do the Punnett square using yeses and nos, then you can go back through and apply the hormone preferences to figure out the percentages of boys and girls. So with this one, it is possible to have a 75% or a 25% because we're considering all 4 squares for both genders. So that will hopefully help you with problem 6, because this is one where dominance is based on gender. Osteoarthritis is sex influenced. There's that keyword again. It's not sex linked, it's sex influenced. It is the result of an allele on an autosome that is dominant in females and recessive in males. Ta-da! The rest is history. You can figure it out now. Just apply the same method, you've got it. If you guys are struggling with this, feel free to watch the video again, and or please, please, please set up a tutoring appointment with me. This is a hard week. And if you get behind here, you're going to be so lost when we get into the later ones. So please, please, please come and talk to me. All right. Send me any emails if you have any questions, and good luck. Thanks for watching this video.